Hello, everyone, and welcome to another webinar here. My name is Hunter Smith with Metastock. I'm very excited to be presenting another webinar, this time with a special guest, Mr. Joe Duffy. Now, we've actually had the pleasure of meeting with Joe Duffy and working with him for quite some time now, and I'll tell you a little bit more about Joe here in just a second. First off, I want to cover the legal part of everything, the disclaimer that we do in every single webinar. This demonstration is designed to instruct you on using Metastock and accompanying software plugins. And it's not a recommendation to buy or sell, but rather guidelines to interpreting and using the specific indicators and features within the software. The information, software, and techniques presented today should only be used by investors who are aware of the risk inherent in trading. Metastock shall have no liability for any investment decisions based on the use of our software, any trading strategies, or information provided with the company. Now that we have the legal stuff out of the way. Joe Duffy is, like I said, we've actually been working with him for a few years now, and we've enjoyed working with him. He has an amazing system that we've actually been able to incorporate into Metastock. Now, we've set aside Joe is a very special partner because he was one of our first Enlighten educational partners, in which we not only took his system and put it within Metastock and all the tools that he consistently uses, but we also got him to do a full educational course along with it. Joe has been trading for quite some time now. He's very highly accomplished as an institutional prop trader. He's a 3-time top 10 finisher in the United States Trading Championship. He's also managed a proprietary FX trading book for one of the largest banks, and he's an active trader himself. Now, before I go on too much about Joe, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine, Hunter. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to you, if that's all right.
Perfect.
All right. I'll just make you a presenter here.
Okay.
Perfect. And there should be a prompt.
Can we see the screen? Okay.
We can't see the screen yet.
Oh, you can't. Okay. Well, I clicked share my screen, so hopefully that's going to come along shortly.
Do you have two monitors?
Well, they're hooked up to different boxes, so I'm all good that way. So I only have one on this box. Is the correct answer?
Okay. Let's see here.
Let me just see if I click. No one can see your screen. Click here to start screen sharing.
There we go.
How about that?
Perfect.
There we go. Okay. Are we good to go now?
Yeah, we're great. Sounds wonderful and looks good too.
Oh, okay. I know that you usually, or at least pop in sometimes to look at the box to see if there's any questions. So is it okay with you if I leave it to you to say, leave them to the end or pop in with one if it's particularly timely? Because I'm good either way.
Sure.
But I can't sort of, mumble on and watch that too for some reason.
Yeah.
We wouldn't even get to that. We talk about neuroscience. Why I can't do that. But,
hey, I'm not a multitasker either, so it's fine. I'll take care of the questions, and you take care of the good stuff.
Okay, bud. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming. We're going to do two things today. First of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about neuroscience and trading and why it's so important. And man, it's so important. And we've learned so much, I would say, in the last year or 2 or 3 years. It's an exponential field of growth. And while I don't understand the neuroscience of what the Johns Hopkins and the Boston University people do, the great part about neuroscience is the findings are so easily understandable to the layman and so applicable. So it's really to me, it's the leading edge of trading and investing. And I think we all need to know a little bit about it. And once you do, you might find that it spills over into your regular life to your advantage as well. So let's start off. Well, okay, what is neuroscience? Well, really, it's just the study of your brain and how it works. And they can now actually I guess the word would be physically see how it works. What neurons are firing. They know now that, for instance, beliefs are actually groups of cells in your brain. That's a belief that they've sort of knotted together and don't want to come apart, by the way. They know now we have neuroplasticity, which means that you can actually change your brain. For a long time, we didn't think that you could change the brain, but we know now that you can, and it's an evolving organism, and that's a good thing for all of us to know that, because we can change it and we can do things differently than we have been. Um, but that's very difficult without knowing how the brain works. But once you know how the brain works, I believe, or have experienced, that everything becomes a lot easier to do in trading and in life. Okay, we talked a little bit about belief systems, and Hunter mentioned multitasking. If I said to you right now, everybody stop multitasking. You can't listen to me in multitask too. Uh, no one would do it. Nobody would do it. It's just Guy said so. And not only that, you have a belief system in your brain that you can multitask and that you're pretty good at it. Now, science, neuroscience, will now tell us that multitasking is a complete myth, that your brain is much more efficient to do one thing at a time and then go to the next thing. You'll get more effective results if you do it that way. You'll do things quicker. In every possible way, multitasking is a myth, but it's the word is part of our common vernacular. Even though it's something that doesn't work, it's part of many people's belief systems. And even though I'm telling you this right now, there's certainly a pushback from very many of you, if not all of you, that's correct. All right, and that's how our brain works. And we'll talk about that, the pushback and change and so forth, a little bit as we go. Now, one of the to start off with something shocking, or maybe shocking to a lot of you, our brain very, very often acts against our own self-interest. Now, some people may go, just much like I said with multitasking. Well, that's crazy. How do I act against my own self-interest? But believe me, it happens all the time. Um, I'm sure you've seen it in your own life. You've watched somebody else, not yourself, but somebody else, go down a path or be doing something, and you're even talking with your spouse or somebody where you're going, well, this can only end one way, and it's not going to be good. And it's very clear to you that it's going to happen that way, but it's not clear to the person doing it. Okay, and that happens in reverse. You do the exact same things where other people can see, oh boy, that he's Wile E. Coyote going over the cliff, and why doesn't he stop? It happens. It happens to everyone. It's part of the way your brain is wired, and part of that is that your brain has different parts. Uh, that's again science. In my opinion, the brain has different parts. It has many different parts, and all those parts don't work together. They all work differently. They work at different speeds. They're in charge of different things, and they are not one cohesive unit. But understanding that is, and being able to stand back from it, as we'll talk to in a little bit, is one of the first steps that we can take to start to undo some of the things that aren't helping us. Okay, and in trading, if you're a trader, if you've ever traded, you know that you've done things that are in your own best interest. And I want to tell you right now, that doesn't mean that any of the things that you may have said to yourself, like, oh, what a dope. Why do I do this? Why do I keep doing this? Those things are normal. That is the way your brain is wired. You're not any better or worse than the next person. Now, of course, uh, like just like some people are more susceptible to heart disease or cancer, some people are more susceptible to doing um, things with certain parts of the brain, whereas other people are more susceptible to doing things with other parts of the brain, and that's going to play out a little differently when it comes to trading. But there are certainly a lot of constants that happen to all of us. Now, why do they happen? Well, your brain is kind of like an operating system. It's like Windows or MS DOS or something. Uh, until you start shoving programs in it's just a processor. For the first 7 years of our life, and a lot of that time, or at least a year or two of that time, we're getting programs put in our brain that we don't even know what they are. We're not consciously aware of what they are. You can't remember them, but they're there. Now, it's interesting that that theory or that statement may have been a theory, 30 years ago, that what happens to you when you're 1 year old can still be affecting you when you're 50. And for many people, it may have seemed ridiculous, or like pop psychology, or much like the statement, does our brain act against our own self-interest? But now with neuroscience and actually being able to see how our brain learns and downloads these programs, and how what neurons fire where, we can actually see the scientific proof that your brain is really wired by the programs you put in it for the first 7 years, and for the rest of your life, it plays those programs back like a PVR. Okay. Another example of your brain being a PVR, and this has happened to everybody. That's why I want to bring it up, because it's happened to everybody. You get in a car and you start to drive, and you're driving to work, or you're driving to school, but that isn't where you're going that day. It's Saturday morning, you start driving to work, when really, you should be going to the golf course. Yay. So I'm sure that experience is happened to everyone. Or you get somewhere and you don't remember anything about it. How did you take all the turns and do all this? Because you don't remember it. Your brain was on autopilot. Okay, just going to pause for a second here. Just going to look at my notes. I'm mostly an ad libber. Most of the day today I spend thinking, oh, I don't know what I'm going to say, just by my slides, and then really not doing much about it, because that's the way they wired my brain. And but I think, though, under all that, there's a part of it that knows that's the way you do it best. So that's the way I seem to continue to do it. Just getting in stuff by the wire. Okay. Again, neuroscience. We now know that 95% of the thoughts that we have in a day are either completely useless or self-sabotaging. 95%. Further to that, we know that 98% of the actions that we take are affected by our subconscious. They are that PVR, playing back the programs that have been put in our head the first 7 years in our life. All right? 98% of our actions are affected by our subconscious. Now, our conscious awareness, which we need to use later on for neuroplasticity and change, is very slow. It moves very slowly. It takes its time. It needs time to think, if you will. But that's where your imagination resides. That's where some discipline resides. That's where things like that reside. Things that maybe take time. But your subconscious, there are 30 billion chemical reactions per second in your subconscious. Now, again, that's the science. 30 billion, if you can get your head around that number, reactions per second in your subconscious. Okay? So you can see why, for instance, if you tend to freeze when you should be getting out of a trade, okay, that fight or flight or freeze mechanism is calling you to freeze. That's happened before the rational thought or thinking or blah, blah, blah can really start to take effect. And then fear starts to set in, and the whole chain reaction of chemical reactions in your brain just reinforces what you've always done. It plays back that same reaction over and over again. Knowing that is one key. Now, you can go deeper and find out, okay, and this is beyond what I would attempt to even tell you, and I'm not sure you need it, but I'm going to give it to you just so to sort of give you a complete picture. For instance, we may freeze, for instance, because we grew up thinking we need to be perfect, so we can't take a loss. Okay, it could be something like that. Do you need to go and attack that deeper thought? Do you need to heal that? Maybe you do. Uh, some people probably do, but for sure, all of us can benefit from the fact that we need to be aware of these things. Okay, conscious awareness is a big thing now. It's there's now that it's backed by science. This whole concept that conscious awareness of meditation, stuff that 30 or 40 years ago was out there with the hippies, now has solid science behind it. Now, all of us have obstacles to change, obviously, not only in our trading life, but in our real life. And the first step to be able to do that is awareness. You have to understand that your brain has different parts. You have to understand that they're not all going to work together. You have to understand that that first reaction of your subconscious needs to be interrupted, or else you're going to do the exact same thing that keeps destroying you. Okay, just that understanding and acceptance is in my experience a huge step into getting things um, straightened around, where our own trading and in other things in our life serve us better. Okay, so how do we grab this awareness? Well, there's lots of books, YouTube videos, whatever right now on conscious awareness. Meditation certainly helps to quiet your brain and balance it a little bit. So that's one way. But I'll give you an analogy that I like to use. The many parts of your brain are like kids in a nursery school. Okay, they're all over the place. Some kids want to do that. Some want to do this. Some kids are, you know, kind and sweet, and some kids are, throwing stones at, their neighbors or whatever. Okay, but you can't let the kid run the nursery school who's standing on his chair screaming, I want ice cream for lunch. Okay, it can't happen that way. We all know that. Okay, now that kid may be the loudest, and just like that part of your brain in trading may be the loudest, or maybe in control at least, when you're doing something that afterwards you realize was not in your own interest. So the first step is being aware that that's going to happen to you, that some part of your brain that is on autopilot that you're not even aware of, that takes place at 30 billion reactions per second, is already causing you to freeze when you should have gotten out of that trade. Okay, for example. Right? So that's going to happen. And I'm using the freeze because, you know what, it's one that was, it was one that was, that I experienced. Okay, occasionally I would freeze on a trade. And so I'm using that example. Yours may be not pulling the trigger on a trade. You may have a fear of being wrong, or um, of of risk, even of just uncertainty. Our brain doesn't like uncertainty. Our brain doesn't like change. The brain's very, very first function, and um, some people argue it's evolved that way or whatever, or it had to, but the brain's very first function is to protect you from harm. Before anything else happens in your brain, the first thing it does is say, how can I protect you from harm? And that in itself can be keeping you stuck in the same old patterns. Uh, for instance, some people won't leave a horrible relationship because they're afraid it could be worse on the other side. So the change, the fear of change or the risk is greater than the pain that they're in. Okay. And that happens to all of us, and to varying degrees. Some people can overcome it more quickly than others. And again, I think that depends on what your history was, what your sensitivity to your history is, and so forth like that. Those things are the next step, certainly beyond my level, but certainly as well awareness of all of this. And when I say awareness, what I would say in or explain in a very simple way is that awareness is the ability to step outside yourself and look at things like you would someone else. So you've got all this knowledge now of how your brain works. So use it. You have to be able to step outside. You have to be able to prepare yourself that when it's time to pull the trigger on the trade, you may not want to do it because you're afraid. You're afraid of being wrong. You're afraid of being not perfect. You're afraid that you're going to lose money. Whatever the fear is, um, you have to deal with it. You have to change in order to be successful at trading, because you can't live there. It can't live there in that first reaction if you're going to be successful at trading. Right. So awareness of it is the first step. Now I'm going to give you a couple of actual practical things that you can do that are based on neuroscience to help you change, or the way they say it in science is neuroplasticity, which means your brain can change. It can carve new neural pathways, and it can actually use the old neural pathways to send the new message. Okay. So another way of saying that, the nursery school analogy is that when you're using that one little part of your brain, you're looking through the pinhole of reality, which is not really the reality. And oftentimes we only see that, later on in our own life. So you have to be able to stand back and see the big picture and not the reality. Okay. Now, too much of what's passed for, or should I say, we have often talked in the market community about the importance of the mental side, and that may include money management, psychology, whatever. But blah 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 blah. That's not fixing it. Saying that it's important, and until you understand it, I don't think you can ever fix it. Right? I would give you the analogy of this: if you have inflammation in your body, and I'm talking about physical inflammation now, you can often treat that with drugs. You can paper over the symptoms. Okay, that is not curing the problem at all. Okay, if you forget to take the drugs one day, the problem is back just as bad as ever. Okay, in with regard to the brain, with regard to psychology, um, using some of the tricks that we've talked about, or saying I have to, or beating yourself up and saying, why am I so stupid? I have to stop doing this. So, I'm not going to do this again, blah, blah, blah. Or even creating these little mantras in your head, or writing things down. They are not enough unless you understand what you need to do to fix it. Okay. So instead of trying to paper over the problem or beating ourselves up a bit about it, we need to be able to stand back, understand why it's happening, and then being able to head it off because we know it's happening, or we know it's going to happen. Okay. And once you understand that, it's not you sitting there saying, oh, why am I so stupid? Because you could look at it this way: your brain is stupid. Okay? Your brain is often stupid. It doesn't work in your own self-interest. So you have to know that. You have to come to accept that, being able to stand outside yourself and then stop the things that your brain is doing and you're, you know, sent from your subconscious that's hurting you. Okay. There's a great quote by Eckhart Tolle. If you've never heard of Eckhart Tolle, he's got a lot of great quotes. Some of his books you find a little obtuse, but some of his quotes I think are awesome. And one of them is that you are not the fears or thoughts or whatever's going on in your head. Okay. Well, who are you then? You are the one that knows this. Okay. So that goes again to this idea that you have to be able to step outside yourself in order to manage yourself, and in our particular instance, your trades and investments properly. The brain, like we talked about before, its first job is protection. It always wants to keep you safe. That's its first job. That idea that it wants to keep you safe happens at a level that you can't possibly process. It's there all the time. And so new connections or new neural pathways in the brain are resisted. our reactions happen in lightning speed that we can't possibly begin to process. So how do we interrupt this? How do we accept that the behaviors or learned behaviors that we had in the first 7 years of our life when we were downloading programs, that those same reactions don't serve us as adults? Okay, they don't, and there's no way to obviously to change the past. Okay, but your brain only associates some of these things with what is confronted now in the present, and the reactions don't serve you anymore. Okay, so how do we change that? How do we interrupt? I use the analogy for me, or the example for me, that I sometimes had trouble um, pulling the trigger on a stop loss. Okay, and sometimes I would freeze a little bit, especially when the market got a little quicker than I anticipated. Um, I could end up in brain freeze mode. Okay, not all the time. Most of the time, I could see things coming, and I would actually try to get out before my stop. And when things started to get away from me, or the market moved by my stop on some sort of news that I didn't know, I could the brain would freeze for me. I had more than one brain freeze on these, and it's probably happened to you, or certainly if you know anyone who trades, it's happened to them. So how do we flip the switch? Okay, if you're having trouble with something like that, and I'll use my example of, I, the deer in the headlights. Okay, I just said to you that your brain's not that smart. Your brain is stupid, and I think that's a good way to look at it, honestly. And it can be easily fooled. For instance, we know that the brain really can't separate reality from imagination. Okay? We know the analogy, or not the analogy, but the actual experiment of 3 test groups. Test group 1 doesn't do anything. Test group 2 shoots basketballs, twice a day for an hour, for 30 days. And test group 3 shoots basketballs in their brain for an hour twice a day for 30 days. Okay. The first group doesn't get any better. And if the second group makes 100 baskets, well, the third group, which didn't do anything physically, whatever, sunk 80 baskets. So both far, far and away better than the group that didn't do anything. Okay. So just practicing that physical movement in your brain was darn near as good as actually physically doing the movement twice a day for 30 days. Okay. So yeah, your brain's easily fooled. It's not that smart. So how can we use that? Well, we can use what we call a bridge to start to train new neural pathways, start to use the old neural pathways in different ways. And the way we do that is so simple. That's the great thing about neuroscience, is it's really, really, it's for the brainiacs. And then when it gets down to the layman, we can all understand it and how we can use it. So the bridge is this. If you had trouble with stop losses, you would write, I used to have trouble with stop losses, and I wouldn't get out when I should. But now I know that I need to honor my stops immediately, no matter what. Okay. So that bridge is, when you start, I used to not honor my stops and not get out when I should, but now I know that I need to get out when my stop is hit immediately. Okay? So you need to set the brain up with the little bridge that this is what it used to do. That was the old neural pathway right there. Okay. Acknowledging that for your brain. Oh, but hold on. Now we're going to do this. Okay. Now that is much better. And again, we're going for science here. They test all this stuff and how your brain lights up and where it goes. That is much, much more effective than just kind of repeating a mantra that I have to honor my stops. I have to honor my stops, because your brain is going to resist that. Just saying, I have to honor my stops. I have to honor my stops. You're pushing against the part of the brain that doesn't want to change. It wants to do things like it always has. But once you make that bridge and you say, or you write, I used to believe blah, 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 but now I know blah, 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 you've made that bridge, and it's much easier for transitions to happen. Okay? So that's one way. And writing things is good. Um, but you have to be actually focused on what you're writing. Okay. Now, if you wrote what I've say a goal, what would be a good goal? So I'm going to use my own example. A good goal would be I want to day trade for 1 week, and I'm going to be profitable, and I'm not going to have even one instance where I let a trade go back too far and I was lucky and it came back. That's my goal for the week. I want to make money. I don't want to have any brain freezes where, the only reason I made money, or one of the reasons I made money, was because I let a trade go by me and it came back, which 80% of the time it's going to do. 20% of the time it's going to wipe out your account. Most people have been through that. If you haven't read the book Market Wizards, you should. They all been through it. We all do, because that's where our brain's been wired. So you're going to write that goal out. I'm going to day trade for a week. I want to be profitable, or whatever your goal is. For if you're an intermediate term trader, I'm going to take all my signals for the next 6 months, and I'm automatically going to put in a 5% stop loss, or whatever your strategy is, and I'm going to put that in when I enter the trade, and blah blah blah. Whatever the strategy is, whatever the goal is, just write yourself out a goal that's not crazy, that's attainable. Okay. Then what I want you to do every day is take your finger along that page, and when you're reading the words, you put your finger on each word, and if you focus, because your brain is electrical impulses, you should be able to feel at least something of an electrical impulse coming through your finger and up to your whatever, up your arm, right? Just by putting your finger on and really focusing on those words, okay? And I want you to think about that electrical impulse coming up your arm, okay? Again, this might have been voodoo 5 years ago. This is science now, okay? This works. They can attach your brain to everything, and they can see what's flashing and what's going on, and this works. Okay, so you're going to write out your goal, a reasonable goal that you can attain. Then every day you're going to put your finger on the page, put your finger across each word, and while you're reading them, you feel that electrical impulse go up your arm and into your head. Okay, sounds crazy? Try it. Okay, it's science now. Okay, that was probably enough for now. Certainly don't want to overwhelm you, because I think we started off with some things that were probably that met resistance. Your brain doesn't want to change, for sure, or at least part of it doesn't. Now, there's a part of it, that frontal cortex, that's got imagination and intelligence, that's listening to this with all sorts of time, and not in a trade right this minute, and it's really easy to well, maybe there's something to this, but when you're actually doing it is when things go a little haywire. Okay, so I've given you a little bit of history of the neuroscience of the brain, introduction to neuroplasticity, how we can change some things, and a couple of really good techniques for doing that. Again, awareness. Okay, you have to be able to stand outside yourself and be aware. Tons of information now on conscious awareness, but it's really not any more difficult than I just explained to you. Okay, you have to be able to stand outside yourself, and one of the easy ways to understand that is that your brain has a whole bunch of different parts that aren't working together, And somebody has to be the parent in the nursery school and stand outside and figure out, what's best for us here and anticipate the problems that are going to come. Okay. We've got the technique of um, using your finger on the page. And one more technique I wanted to just to give to you, okay? Because things happen at 30 billion reactions a second in your subconscious. Um, we need a way to interrupt that, because once they start happening, it's you need a way to interrupt it while they are happening, because sometimes you can't stop them before if you don't anticipate them coming. And we've all heard the term, find your breath. Okay, and this will do it. Again, this is a physical um, thing that happens in your brain. So you can breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth like you're blowing out a straw. And you can do that about 10 times. Okay. That will quiet down all those, neurons that are firing in your brain and telling you to do something that, only later will you be able to go, oh, what was I thinking? Why did I do that? That will quiet all that stuff down. Give your frontal cortex a chance to use its intelligence and its knowledge to take over the situation and do what's right. Okay, so the simple breathing. Okay, that's another good technique besides the finger on the page, and just the general awareness. Okay, which comes first. Okay, so now, having even said all that, if you don't have a good strategy, well, you're not going anywhere. You can have all the mental acuity you like about your brain, and that may help you in your life, but it's not going to help you in your trading unless you have some sort of skill at it. Okay, so the Scoop suite of indicators, as Hunter said, is something that I have developed over many years, and we've managed to get it automated largely in here into Scoop. Uh, I will say this, that a successful trading technique, in all my experience, and perhaps others' experience is going to be different, but all the research I've done testing, which is, many years, is it is never as simple as if A then B. And if you think about that for a second, it can't be. If it was ever as simple as A then B, then everybody would be doing it, everybody would be doing fine. It is not like that. It is peeling back the layers of the onion. Okay, the market does not give up her secrets easily, but they are there, and they come, like they come in waves, or come in like unfolding the layers of the onion. Okay, so it's never as simple as A then B. You need a um, strategy that has multiple layers, and that's why when we put the Scoop together, um, when I was talking to Jeff and Hunter, I said, okay, it's not enough just to have this pop up on your screen. There's just too much more to it that isn't going to be able to be shown on the chart, or isn't going to be able to be explained in a 2-minute expert or a 2-paragraph expert that pops up. It's just not that. It's simple once you understand it, but it has layers that you also need to understand. And that's why we've got, 6 or 7 videos and about a succinct manual, which is probably about 40 pages. I don't want to make it sound like it's overly complicated and that you won't understand it unless you're an experienced trader, because that's not it. But what it does have is multiple layers of things that you need to be aware of. None of them are difficult at all. Okay, they are not difficult. If you can open your Metastock and put a chart on it, you follow the rules. Okay, so we've got a couple of components here. I've got an automated system that follows some of the general principles that I use, and you can see the buy and exits are up here now. It's very short term, so it's good for like option traders, or something like that, or futures traders. Um, and we've got what we have below, which is our Scoop indicator, which has that's where the layers come in. Okay, these two things can work well together, although the system here just has buys and sells, so we had to automate that. and all those rules are built in. But you can see it's a short-term oriented system, but it does pretty well. Has a pretty good accuracy rating of 70% or so, and works on a large majority of stocks. And because of its higher accuracy rating, you might be able to find a lot of success doing credit spreads or something with it, where a trade, um, you know, that maybe like this one here, where it bought here and got out here, is really just a scratch trade. If you bought the stock, but if you did a credit spread, it would actually be a winning trade. Um, okay, so that's part of it, is the automated system that produces buys and sells for you. What we have underneath here is what we call our scoop indicator, and there are several components to this. And the averages here are a couple. This is a 20 period and a 200 period. They also play into that, and not just as trend directional indications. But be very, very, very basically, step one now. Okay, I said it's never as simple as A then B, but I will show you step A. If the histogram is under 0, and the black line here, which is our scoop trend, is also under 0, and scoop goes up here and starts to turn down, well, then that's a sell. Okay, so similarly here. Okay, uh, vice versa for buys. Now, there's also some other things. Not every time would this be a sell. This may not be a sell here. There are some other rules. Okay. Similarly here, histogram is above 0. The black line, the scoop trend is above 0. Scoop oscillator goes down below and turns up. And you can see these are often compatible with the automated system, although the automated system has nothing to do with scoop. It works on similar principles, but nothing to do with the actual scoop indicator itself. Now, so that's the entries, or at least part A of the entry setup using scoop. It also has exits. For instance, if you had bought right here, you would be getting out of this trade probably right around here somewhere. So it would have held that trade much longer than the system, which has been in and out a couple times. Okay. So it also stops are reasonably close on scoop here. So if you had had a buy here on scoop, and it did show you something, it gave us something here, but may not have been enough. What we do is we take this low, and if we get a close below it, then we're usually out. So our risk isn't great. We want to see the closing basis new low, and then we would get out. So on a trade like this, you could go either way. Would you have taken some profits, or would you have got stopped out? I don't know. But mechanically, you would have got stopped out. Okay, so it does have rules for taking profits and stop losses. It has rules for everything. Okay, and as I said, it's multi-layered. The layers aren't difficult, but you can't trade successfully trading off a one-dimensional chart. Just I don't believe, I've never seen anything that worked over the long period like that. The market's simply not as easy as if A then B. Okay, so I don't want to beat this horse. What I will do quickly is I'll run this system for you on oops. Okay, yeah, here we go. All right, so we call it the API. There's a couple versions. One holds trades a little longer than the other, but they're basically the same. So we'll run this on the SPY index. So running down here in the back corner, so we're going to see the results. So as you can see, it has made about 308 points of profit over the last 25 years or so. With the S&P's not, or the SPY's not even 308 right now, so it's made more points trading both sides of the market than the SPY is if you had bought the SPY at 0 when the history started here. Let's see here. Let's show the equity curve. Okay, so you can see it's a pretty smooth curve. You don't really have a lot of drawdown, which is another advantage of it for credit spreads. That's one advantage. The other advantage is if you have a system that has a fairly consistent result, even if that result isn't spectacular. You can, and I'm not saying this isn't, but I'm saying if you have another system where the equity curve looks straight like this, it's a really good system for using money management to expand the value of the system. Where I mean by that, if you buy 100 shares the first time and you make a profit, then the next time you can buy 102 shares or 101 shares or whatever profit that you made, and then you continue like that. Now, obviously, that leverage can cut both ways, which is why the smoothness of the equity curve is very important. Because even in these little down dips here, you are going to have a larger position on this little dip than you had, say, back here when it was going up. So you can't get caught with huge positions while the market is having a monstrous free fall. So the straightness of the equity curve is never to be underestimated in terms of your sleepability and your potential profitability using money management. Okay. Uh, so I think that's really all I have to say about the Scoop Suite. I don't want to, beat your head over or beat you over the head with it. It's a good system. You can test it. I think it has all the qualities that you need for either intraday or end of day trading. Um, the API system, which we see here, is great for stocks. Um, I'm going to leave it there. I don't know if Hunter has any questions, but certainly, if you do have any questions for me and that you'd rather just email me, it's Joe at jdtradingsystems.com. Joe at jdtradingsystems.com, and I would certainly be happy to accommodate any questions you have. And I'm just going to go back right now and check with Hunter and see if we've got anything um, that I can answer for you right now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joe. Looking through the questions here. Let's see. And what all instruments does the Scoop system work on? What markets?
Everything. The actual mechanical system is really designed for stocks, um, but the Scoop principles really work on everything. And the principle basically is this: um, find the trend and define it. Uh, Figure out where the pullback is, and to that extent, it has to be dynamic because, as you all know, some pullbacks you have to buy them shallow, and some pullbacks you have to buy them a little bit deeper, and it sort of adjusts for that. Um, uh, so yeah, it doesn't. I come from a currency background. Even though I'm stocks now, when I used to trade for the bank, I was trading currency. So yeah, really, the principle applies to every market. I think find the trend, find the pullback, um, find a way to get in, find a way to put your stop. That's what this does.
Okay, wonderful. Let's see, what else do we have here? Another question. What periodicities does this work with? I think they're kind of wondering how long, if this works with intraday periodicities, how long to
Absolutely.
stay in a trade,
You know,
etc.
absolutely. For the scoop, absolutely. For the system, to be perfectly honest with you, the shorter time periods you go, the harder it is to make systems work at all because there is more um, randomness uh, at smaller time frames. You can get monstrous moves, and we all know this. You look at a 5 minute chart, you can get moves that just proportionally can't happen on a daily chart. They just can't happen. They don't happen. So there is more randomness and more volatility on a smaller time frame. So generally, the system that is designed here is for stocks, and I wouldn't go past a half day chart or something when using it for that. But for the scoop, I mean, you can go down to minutes if you love it. Go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. Let's see. Does this come with back testing? Yes, it does. I can go ahead and answer that one. It does come with back
Yep.
test. That's one of the things that I really like about this system is the fact that you can back test it. Proof is in the pudding, as they say. Um, uh, one of the things that you touched on, and one of the things I really enjoyed about this webinar is the fact that you touched on the fact that trading really does have two different sides. So you have the psychological side and you have the system. It's very, very easy to find stocks to trade. I think it's more difficult to stick to your system and stick to a plan that actually works. That is why I really, really like this add-on, and the reason that we did so much education with it and really had Joe go significantly deeper into the actual education aspect of it is so that we could tackle both aspects because I feel like you'd agree with me here, Joe, but having the mental attunement and having the discipline mentally and emotionally to stick to a system, I think that's really, really important.
Well, it is, but it's no longer, I think, for me, and it's no longer just saying, "Oh, I got to have the willpower to do this." It's understanding that um, there's nothing wrong with you, that or there's nothing, you're not weak or damaged or anything because you have lapses of discipline. Your brain is wired to have them. So once you understand that, and you understand how to interrupt the process, and you understand it's not your fault or your problem, or it is your problem, but it's not your shortcoming. It's much easier to you're not taking it personally. It's not like you're an undisciplined person or you're
Sure.
whatever. It's just that's how our brains are wired, and understanding that, and the fact that the pieces don't always work together in our self-interest is really an important part to me of being able to overcome those problems. Like I said, by understanding where the inflammation comes from instead of papering it over, by saying I need more discipline. Well, that's not helping. You know, it's not a solution.
Yeah, and having always keep it in the back of your mind that this is a process and not an event. And that's why the
Yes.
system works very well because it does take
Yep.
care of showing you how to enter trades technically, but it also is going to cover the emotional aspects of things.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I think we covered them today, but also on exits, yeah, there are certainly, we don't just tell you how to get into the trade and then leave you. Okay, we'll show you how to get out.
yeah, exactly. And this is a very visually intuitive system. It's
Absolutely.
very, very simple. You'll find that a lot of traders' screens have a bunch of indicators and oscillators and things all over it, et cetera. And sometimes that can be very overwhelming, and it gets difficult to stay very simple if your screen's very,
Can
very cluttered and you have a billion different
can I
things going on.
just address that for 1 second,
Yeah,
because
please
it's
do.
such a great point.
Yeah.
It's such a great point.
Mhm.
And why do we do that? Why are we always looking, even if we have something that's working for us? We always say, "Oh, geez, if I could just add one more thing," right? So something in our head, in our subconscious head now, not is saying, "Oh, I have to be perfect. I can't ever make a mistake," or um, you know, no, you have it. Just leave it.
Hmm.
Don't always looking to be changed what's working.
Hmm.
It's adding more to it is not going to be. It's not going to be better. It's not. But
Exactly.
yeah, yeah,
And being malleable as a trader, but also keeping your system simple. And I think that that's really when, having systems like this and education like this is really, really important.
right,
One
right.
of
I
the
don't know who said it, but simple as possible, but not simpler, right?
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And the one thing that another thing I really like about this system is this was all back tested previously, very, very extensively. This system also, as Joe covered a little bit earlier, it works with futures, FX, stocks, options, etc. Um, the system itself actually comes with 4 expert advisors. It comes with 1 template. It comes with 9 explorations. Comes with 2 system tests because, again, as we touched on earlier, the proof really is in the pudding. It comes with 3 different indicators. Now, the really, really important part here, this is one of our only add-ons that comes with these training modules, these advanced training modules. Now, there are 5 advanced training modules in which Joe spends an extensive amount of time breaking down each and every single part of this system and how to trade it effectively. Uh, Metastock, we've always done a very, very good job of providing very good tools for you to trade with, but we're not in the business of teaching people how to trade. And that's where partners like Joe come into play, and really educating you on how to use these tools very, very effectively. As Joe alluded to earlier, it comes with the advanced training course manual, which is, I don't remember, I think it's like 40 or 45 pages. Now, this is a very, very comprehensive system, especially with the Enlighten education. Let me skip forward here. One of the things that we really wanted to concentrate on with Enlighten is, the education aspect and walking you through every single process involved with the system and how to trade it. Because again, you can have the best tools in the world, but if you don't know how to use them, you're not going to make money. And that's what we're in this for, is to profit. So with this, combined with the Enlighten education, and Joe really bringing more than just a couple of buy and sell signals to the table, but educating you on really how to take time and trade with this, that's really where the value of this program comes into play. Now, normally, this system is $6.99. Okay, it's a one-time purchase of $6.99. But we did this webinar at a special time. That was on purpose. But we have our Black Friday in July special. It's Thursday today, but if you guys come into chat right now, we'd be more than happy to take care of you with this special pricing. But we've actually taken half off. So the Black Friday in July special pricing is $349 for this add-on. And again, that comes with all of the tools that you saw here today. It comes with that 5 module training course and the advanced training manual that's available in your download section once you purchase the add-on. So again, normally this is $6.99. Typically, I think Joe sells this for about $9.99, and we were able to kind of talk him down a little bit on that. But
it's on the website, jdtradingsystems.com.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
At $9.99.
Yep. But
we worked real hard, and I was able to talk Joe down a little bit just on price, and then we're doing the Black Friday and July price.
Don't go there on me anymore. It's worth $6.99. I'm just saying.
Well, glad we talked you down a little bit. To take advantage of this sale, all you have to do is go to metastock.com/sales chat, and we'll go ahead and put that in the comment section for those of you who are watching along on YouTube. I'll put this in the chat on GoTo. Just go to metastock.com/sales chat, or if you go to metastock.com, there's going to be a little chat button that pops up. Just go ahead and click on that, and we have reps available right now. Mention that you were in this webinar so that they give you the special pricing. Aside from that, Joe, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for presenting today. I think it was a wonderful presentation. So many people just focus on buy and sell signals. So I think addressing the psychological aspect of trading is very, very important. So I appreciate that with your presentation today.
I appreciate you having me. I like doing it. I think I like helping people, and when you teach, you learn. So, I was just sort of having fun with you on the pricing, but, it's good for me to do it too. When I do this, it reinforces for me stuff that, you can start to take for granted, because your brain starts to want to push it into the background. Oh, you know that. So whenever I do it, it pushes it back into the foreground. So it helps us all. So I hope that you guys got something out of it, regardless of whether you buy the product.
Wonderful. And thank you again so much. Guys, go ahead and go to metastock.com/sales chat. This pricing, I forgot to mention, it is only good through today and tomorrow. And again, Black Friday, very limited time sale. So call in or chat in by end of day tomorrow to get that special pricing, basically half off. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending this webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us at Metastock, or feel free to contact Joe. Again, thanks for attending, and as always, happy trading.